A huge thank you to Robert Bishop for sponsoring today's video on Patreon. Hello all, at the beginning of my videos recently, you have all noticed that there's been little deck text explaining the deck before we go into the gameplay, and those have been received very well, so I'm grateful to you all for that. Unfortunately, even though those segments are only 2, 3, 4 minutes long, you wouldn't appreciate how many hours they take to make. They take a hell of a long time. Maybe it's just because I'm bad at video editing, but it takes a very long time to pull all the assets and put them all into little animations and stuff like that. So frankly, with a lack of additional viewership and retention on the videos from those things, I can't really justify putting all the effort into them. But I didn't want you to go without these deck texts that you like explaining the deck before the video, so here's a little compromise for you. I will try and make them as aesthetically easy to follow as possible. So hopefully you can make do with this. Should be a lot quicker for me to go through. Hope Estheim is a 2-mana lifelink commander, a 2/2, and it cares about life gained by the end of your turn. Each opponent mills equal to the life gained. So we can gain life on our opponent's turns, but we only mill at the end of our turn. So I decided to go with a go tall strategy and focus on gaining more life during our turn with combat and lifelink. The Soul Sisters are going to draw us a hell of a lot of life throughout the game, most of which only trigger on our creatures entering, but like I said, we only care about life gained during our turn anyway. And so when we are gaining the life, we want to make use of life gain matters, as I have dubbed it, in order to actually gain some more benefit from gaining life, as well as hopefully the mill on our opponents. So Cleric class, Heliod Suncrowned and Light of Promise will buff our creatures. Hopefully these go onto lifelinkers so that we can continue to gain even more life. Give some buffs to the lifelinkers, which is why Excalibur II is in here. This can just sit on the battlefield for 1 mana. It will look at every time you gain a life, and it will put a charge counter +1/+1 for each charge counter on it to the equipped creature. So it might sit there most of the game, just slowly getting bigger and bigger, and then all of a sudden you would equip it to something like Ocelot Pride. Swing in for a bunch of lifelink damage. Maybe you'll gain something like 10 life just from that one creature, and that is obviously 10 cards milled for your opponent. And we've got creatures that buff themselves on the life gain itself. So Ajani's Pride Mate, Essence Channeler as well, and we can lose life to fetches and some pain mana as well. Voice of the Blessed eventually gains Flying Vigilance and Indestructible. This gets up encounters really quickly. Exemplar of Light, the same thing, except it doesn't have lifelink. We've got a means of giving our big creatures like this and the Ajani's Pride Mate an Essence Channeler lifelink. Otherwise they're just big dumb beaters. This will gain us card advantage throughout the entire turn cycle as well. Again, goes well with the Soul Sisters because it triggers on every turn. And Ajani, Strength of the Pride, it can act as a single-sided Wrath, but it can also make us Ajani's Pride Mate tokens and gain us life every turn. So if we can get this in early enough or after a Wrath, something like that, get a hell of a lot of value out of this. Makes big creature tokens and gains us a lot of life. And then I didn't know where else to mention this, but there's 2 versions of this spell. There's one that gains you 10 and loses you 10 when it enters and leaves. This one is for 20 life when it enters, and you lose 20 life when it leaves. We don't particularly care about losing the life, only gaining it on our turn. So have this hit play, go through to the end step with hope. You've gained at least 20 life, which means your opponents mill 20, and then you just give up on this and lose the 20 next turn. It doesn't really matter. Then I just mentioned that we've got a means of giving the big dumb creatures lifelink. Steel Seraph is one of those means. Another lifelink enabler, Shadow Spear, also gives us evasion in the form of trample, so if one of our creatures gets big enough we can trample damage straight through. And don't forget, as well as the plus counters, Heliod the Suncrown can give lifelink also. And I just mentioned the double life gain, so we'll go over that here. We've got 3 cards that care about doubling our life, so Rock's Faith Mender just so happens to be a lifelink creature as well, so goes well with the plus counter sub-theme. Same is true of the Wind Crystal. This will also give us a discount on white spells, which is the majority of the list. And then for 6 mana and tap, we can give our creatures lifelink and flying, so another lifelink enabler for those big creatures. And then 6 mana for an instant. I'm not sure if the instant is going to be relevant here because we want to gain life on our own turn. But point being, we can double a target player's life total, obviously targeting ourselves. And that does count as life gain. And then that is going to have our opponents milled. So if you're at 60, you go up to 120, your opponents mill 60, If you're anywhere beyond the mid-game, you've likely just milled them out with this card and your commander alone. And I've mainly focused on the life gain variant of the list, but there are 5 mill specific cards here, and they are all a means of taking half of your opponent's life total, or half of your opponent's library down to mill. There are combos here, but we'll go over those later. Bruvac just doubles up the mill that we would do, so pretty simple really. And then Cut Your Losses also only goes after one opponent unless you want to sacrifice a 2-powered creature, which we should be able to do quite easily. You could mill out 2 opponents at sorcery speed for 6 mana with this. Again, these are part of combos, which we will go over later. As well as those, we've got some finishers. There's Aetherflux Reservoir. We all know what that does. We're not going to be chaining a bunch of spells into this really, unless we get into a lot of our 1-drops, of which there are plenty in the list. But what's more likely is that we're going to drop this straight away, pay the 50 and shoot someone out of the game. Same with Angel of Destiny. We can hit an opponent with either this or a bunch of our creatures. We gain life and our opponent gains life equal to the damage dealt. And then if we're at 55 or more life, then that player that was attacked by the angel loses the game. Test of Endurance. Once we're at 50 or more life, at the beginning of our upkeep, we just win the game. Doubles the triggers on our small creatures, and any small lifelinkers, like our commander, will be unblockable with this as well. This goes very well with the Soul Sisters, of course. In fact, most of the creatures in the deck are small creatures. It will trigger Hope twice at the end of the turn as well, which is the main reason it's in here. It triggers a lot of our card draw twice as well. Esper Sentinel, again, think of the plus counters, but Esper Sentinel triggering twice with Delny. Enduring Innocence just so happens to have lifelink as well, and we gain life from Inspiring Overseer and the Priest. Elite Garb Mage gains 3 and draws a single card. Cloud Blazer gains 2 and draws 2, all of which are triggering twice to the Delny, so just keep Delny in mind when we're looking at more of the creatures here. The One Ring, we're not too worried about the burden on this because we're gaining so much life, so this is going to protect us for a turn, but more importantly, it is going to draw us a hell of a lot of cards, as the One Ring tends to. And we've got another legendary artifact in Marina Vendrell's Grimoire. You cast it and draw 5 cards, you've got no max hand size, and don't lose the game for having 0 or less life. We're not looking to have very little life in this deck, because we want to be gaining lots of it, and with this in play, whenever we do gain, we draw that many cards, so there's actually a slight risk of us decking ourselves to this. But we don't lose to no life at least. What we can lose to is having no cards in hand while this is in play, and whenever we lose life we do have to discard that many, so we'll have to be careful that we can actually make the blocks, or at least make the discard. But the Grimoire drawing us so many cards is something that I very much look forward to playing with, so hopefully we'll be able to see that. Let's go and have a look at the combos that we can make use of these with before getting the game underway. A lot of these mill effects can all work together. They just look at your opponent's library or graveyard, see that half of the cards are in there, and then mill the rest. A better version of this is milling 2 of your opponents to cut your losses, bearing in mind that your opponents are going to have lots of cards in their graveyard from the commander as well, so the exhaust on each opponent is going to be well worth it. Or you could cut your losses, milling half the 2 opponents' libraries. With Bruvac in play, it mills their entire library instead, because twice of half of their library is their entire library, for any of you who aren't that mathematically gifted. And it's all much of a muchness really, so you're basically getting half the library. Bruvac can see it, or Fraying Sanity can see it and do the other half. You get the idea. All these mill cards are pretty much interchangeable with each other. So there we are. Hopefully I made that clear enough for you all. Let me know what you think of these versions of the deck text, because like I said, I can't justify all the animations in the amount of time that it takes me to do it. So hopefully this has made things more clear as we go into the gameplay here. Well, there's plenty of mana in this opening hand, so should be able to get the Planeswalker going quite quickly. Playing against Joda the Unifier, Admiral Brass, and Queen Marchesa. Definitely keeping this. Problem is we're going to empty our hand quite quickly here. So the question is, do we want to go for Azorius Signet straight away here? We're in a life gain deck, so I don't mind taking damage to Ancient Tomb right from the offset. 2 mana ramp 3 times in a row here. Draw into Steel Seraph, which we've got half a chance of playing down as a 6 mana creature. So play Ajani, we can start gaining life off that next turn. But first of all we want to go for the -2, making an Ajani's Pride Mate. Although if we want to start milling straight away, we'll have to get down our hope, and that means we can't go for the Faith Mender, so maybe I will go for the Steel Seraph and we can start gaining life straight away. If we get it down as a 3-drop, the Lotho is going to gain treasure every time someone double spells. Mary Reed and Anne Bonny, that's a 3-3. They decide to tap it down as opposed to swinging in with the haste, so go for the loop straight away. And discarded Angrath's Marauders to that, so do get into a tap treasure. Alright, a Light of Promise is going to buff up our lifelinker quite nicely. I wonder if it's worth ticking down with a Ajani. If we get down the Rock's Faith Mender here, we'll be able to hold up removal for Marchesa when she swings in as a hasty Death Toucher. So let's grab some more white mana. And I think we're fine getting down the Rock's Faith Mender and holding up Swords to Plowshares. Means we're not gaining life yet, but we don't have our commander in play yet anyway. -2 with the cat, or with the Ajani to make a cat, so we're ready to start gaining life and buffing this stuff up now. We're going to be difficult to swing into because this does have lifelink. And here she is, the MTG Commander will be the first one. We assumed that she was going to hit play. Might be able to keep hold of our swords if they don't go after Ajani. And they don't swing in, that's fine. So looks as though we're going to be able to keep hold of our removal here. Draw a card to the Monarchy. I'm guessing they're not very happy with the cards in their hand if they're that eager to hold on to this. They obviously care about the swing back and someone stealing it from them. A Roaming Throne doubles up the triggers from Pirates. So might see double treasure off this. We're assuming that he's going to get double treasure because he just played the Roaming Throne. And loots a Coercive Recruiter into the bin, so we'll assume that that's part of a combo. And does get the double treasure. Joda the Unifier hits play for the first time. That might have to eat a swords as well. I think we're going to have to continue to hold it up. And then we draw Otawara as well for another land. Fix our blue mana a little bit. And go for the Hope Estheim. Priority being held up by the Mardu player, so this might whiff. Players do really hate playing against mill, in my experience. Even when most of the time it's not usually the threat. Obviously we want it to be a threat here, but it'd be interesting to see how our opponents respond to Light of Promise onto the commander. Trigger Lotho for the first treasure token. After this we will tick up on Ajani and gain a life for each creature and planeswalker we control. So we're down to 31 already thanks to that Ancient Tomb. But get into our life gain for the first time. So that is 5 life we gain, doubled is 10, so it's 10 plus counters on the Hope already. Maybe could have put it onto the Rock's Faith Mender so that we can swing in this turn. Might have been a better idea. And then we can further buff and gain some more life with Rock's Faith Mender. If we swing in down the middle, these will become 4/4s. So I think that's fine. We're not holding up quite as much toughness, this being a 1/5, but just want to gain as much life as possible here really. And decides to block. We're gaining the life regardless, so he might as well block there. Now that means we gain a further 2 life, so Hope will get some plus counters. We're looking at threatening some commander damage, although we're not very easily going to get through in this list. It's just because Hope has lifelink stitched onto it already. Maybe should have put it onto the Faith Mender there though, so that we could force him to block with something like this. So what have we gained there? 12 life. That means each opponent mills 12 cards. So we've got each of them to around 74 already left in the library. And next turn, if we can gain a bunch of life into the Hope, we can always go for 0 onto this. We need to be at 55 life at least in order to have each of our opponent exile their stuff. Brina is going to start throwing plus counters around. We do care about plus counters a little bit in this deck. We are at the highest life total as well. Again, decides not to swing in though. If this is a Mardu control build, which it might still be, could be drawing into spot removal here. Gets up to 6 in hand with the Monarch there. Now Admiral Brass is coming into play. We could remove it before combat. He's got some scary stuff in the bin. He gets double triggers here on the mill. And he's going to be able to steal our board with those double triggers. He's got double damage that we saw previously as well in Angrath's Marauders. Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty he could do. It's a real risk allowing him to go through to the beginning of combat here, but I'm going to do it. If he steals the Hope, then he is going to mill out our other 2 opponents for us, as well as buff our Ajani and our Hope with the Light of Progress. So I'm going to risk allowing this. Yeah, he's going for that Coercive Recruiter like we said, so he's going to be able to steal pretty much our entire board with the double triggers. Very, very risky this. Just have to pray that we don't go down to commander damage on our own commander. Or at least have a blocker to throw in the way. Takes the Joda for some buffs on the legends as well. Which bumps this up to an 18-18. A 9-9 Joda. 7-7 Mary Reed. His commander's a 7-7. It has summoning sickness though. And yep, he is reanimating Angrath's Marauders as we thought he might. Like I said, this is a risk. I'm hoping that if he can threaten Hope commander damage onto us, he will only swing in at us with Hope. And if that's the case, we either remove Hope with swords or the Angrath's Marauders, and that way we can still survive. And yeah, he is taking our Pride Mates, which means he doesn't want us to have blockers. Is he going to turn in sideways with everything towards us? Attacks us with Hope. Hopefully that's all he attacks us with. That's an 18-18. Alright, awesome. It looks as though... yeah, he's taking everything into the right. That's excellent. So he's hoping to one-shot 2 players here, which I don't think he's going to do. But Hope swinging in towards us, it gains him life, but it is still going to mill our other 2 opponents, which is great. We're going to have to get rid of the double damage though. So unfortunately he doesn't take out Joda, I don't think. But our gamble has well and truly paid off here. Assuming that he doesn't counter the swords, that is. Alright, thought he was tapping out mana for counterspell there. Is a Chaos Warp onto his own Marauders to put it back in the library. Well, it could have been worse as long as it's leaving play right now. I don't really care. And just managed to make a land, as is usually the case with Chaos Warp. Won't gain the life from it at least. But he's about to gain enough from our commander. So he does buff up our Hope for us very kindly. Because he's gaining himself some life here. He gets double triggers on that as well. Gets double triggers on our Ajani Pridemate as well. Yeah, it was risky letting him go through to combat. But Joda is now going to get an untap. He goes down to 7 life. And there's every chance that we'll threaten commander damage on this guy. Unfortunately, we can't go for the one-sided Wrath on Ajani now. Because obviously we lost a load of life there. But it's still double triggers on the Hope. So each of our opponents are still getting milled. How much are we going to get milled by is the problem. We've got 87 cards in the library left, so we should be alright. We're down to 69 on the first resolution. And then 51 after that, 37 for the Mardu player, and 38 for the Joda player, who hopefully doesn't have Mass Reanimation in his hand, probably couldn't afford to cast it anyway. Now does this have Ward or something? No it doesn't, so we could always bounce it out of the way with Otawara and get rid of this guy after he's kindly buffed up our commander to a 50-50 lifelinker. You have to assume Joda's going to have removal for the Hope. Or a board wipe maybe? That is Teferi, that can tuck our commander, can't it? He will cascade into something here as well, and then gets himself into baby Teferi. So we can't cast instants. Also bounces an artifact, creature or enchantment. And we are tapped out of course thanks to the attacks, so Joda could take out Ajani as well. Tucks the... alright, putting Coercive Recruiter back into the library, I'm not sure about that. He can't afford to, yeah, he is bouncing Hope. He can't allow us to untap with that because we just take everyone out next turn. And we assume Ajani goes down here. Nope, leaves Ajani in play. So we managed to draw into a Flooded Strand. I think it might be worth holding up the Otawara to not have a combat like that again in this case. Flooded Strand, I think we definitely want to be getting Hope back into play. And Otawara currently costs 3, which means the Steel Seraph can't come down for 3 mana unfortunately. So that means we could go for a Surveil land. Let's tick up with Ajani. And I think we'll have to allow our opponents to worry about the Teferis. Or I suppose I could swing in 1 creature at one of the Teferis. Yeah, I suppose we should show willing and do that. It'd be ideal to have this in place so that we could get lifelink on the Pride Mates, but I haven't quite managed to make the correct amount of mana yet. So swinging at the big Teferi, 7-7 versus a 6-6. And did we gain 10 life there? Must have been 10 life thanks to the double life. So Hope triggering again. And take this guy down to 25, 54 and 27. So next turn, if we manage to keep these things in play, it could be worth getting this down regardless, just swing in anywhere. Hopefully get the double life and keep our commander in play. And that would take 2 players out. Well, Sunforge is always a scary one to see. I want to be holding on to Otawara to bounce this really, but there's too many threats at the table at the moment. you have to assume that we are going to be on the receiving end of this thing. Equips it onto the Brina and does swing in at our Ajani. So do we just give the pirates another shot there? I suppose I should be trying to look through the graveyard to see what they could reanimate next turn. The Skeleton Crew, Soul Diviner will remove the finality counters, breaches. Stormfleet is an unblockable. Direfleet Netbreaker will buff the pirates. Port Razor gives additional combats. Do we just have to give up on Ajani here? I think we do. It's just bad luck that we've gone up against a player who can play really well from the graveyard. A Were goes on to, hopefully he's remembered the ward cost on Roaming Throne. Does decide to pay the ward, so he's only got 1 treasure mana held up now. Now let's hope the pirate player taps out before he goes through to combat. Problem is it triggers at the beginning of combat, so we can't bounce it before he attacks. We just have to hope that he taps down some mana so he can't just replay Admiral Brass straight away. Looks as though he's tapping down some mana. Don't leave up 5 mana, please. Alright, Skeleton Crew is returning to the battlefield tapped, so that's just going to be a buff. After that, hard casts a Captain Storm. When an artifact enters, plus counter on a pirate you control. So I'm guessing he's looking to activate this so that he can make a treasure. Passing priority through to combat here. So let's bounce the Admiral. So it's a 3 mana bounce with Otawara onto the Admiral. Not likely to be able to counter this because it is an ability on these things as opposed to a spell. Could be that Joda completely screws up our next turn as well though. Well, there's a Chain Veil. He can't afford to tap that down to get additional activations at least. Unless he gets into more mana here. There's an Aminatu, which means he can minus down the Teferi so he can activate this twice and still bounce something. It's not really the end of the world if he bounces anything of ours. We'd rather keep hold of this to make a bunch of life next turn, but he doesn't know that we've got lifelink available on them, so he might leave them alone. It's noteworthy that thanks to the double spells there are now 2 treasure here in order to activate the Sunforger, which isn't good. Does he have an instant speed board wipe that he can go for with it is the question. Might just be spot removal on the Hope before we go through to the end step. Anyway, ticked up on the Teferi and then decided to flicker, and I would probably be trying with this to bounce this creature so that it can't unattach the Sunforger and go for the tutor. He probably goes after something of ours though. I mean, we can go wide on him, so it makes sense to go for one of the Pride Mates. Yep, so goes for the bounce. We can still mill our opponent for 20 next turn if we swing in with everything. That'll likely mean losing our Hope though, so maybe not the best idea. I forgot to crack the Flooded Strand, so could have seen the top card here. And Inspiring Overseer is another couple of life, which might actually be worth doing. Depends if we keep Hope in play, I suppose. Let's go for a 4 mana Steel Seraph. We've got this that we can disturb from the graveyard as well. That triggers on creatures leaving the battlefield though, as opposed to entering, so it's not quite the same as the rest of the Soul Sisters. So let's go for the Seraph, and we can go through to combat after that. Give the Pride Mate lifelink. Priority consistently being held up by all our opponents here. So we'll give lifelink over to the Pride Mate. Could be flying or vigilance, but obviously we're going to go for the life gain in a life gain deck. And we might as well go after Aminatu, and I'll just swing in the other 2 kind of arbitrarily to the left. Does decide to block our commander with his. We'll still gain the life, but we'll have to replay the Hope so that the end trigger can resolve. Does not block the Rock's Faith Mender damage. So we managed to steal the Monarchy and get some buffs on the Ajani. So we haven't quite milled out our opponents yet, but we're pretty damn close. This guy will only have 1 card left in his library. Let's go for the Jewel, replay the commander. Another treasure being made by the Lotho, and we'll see if Hope survives to the end step here. Well, the trigger is allowed to resolve. We'll put Hope on the stack first, see what we draw into with the Monarch. Just draw into a land. And there we have the Mardu player down to 5. Joda only has 1 card, so we're not too worried about the legends that he's going to cast. He's just disconnected, so I'm guessing that he's just going to time out on us. Nope, he's just going to hit concede. Well, at least he was gracious enough to do that. Unfortunately, we are playing into the pirate player's hand, which is always the case when you've got a reanimator list. Just bad luck for us, unfortunately. I'm amazed he hasn't made use of the Sunforger yet. The cards won't expand for some reason, but we've got a 7/5 and a 1/1 Death Toucher. We'll just take the damage, it doesn't really matter. We're at 50 life again. They do manage to take the monarchy away from us. And a Ghostly Prison, just a case of seeing if he can last the next 4 turns. Or actually it's less than that because he just decided to draw more with the Monarch. Doesn't seem likely he's going to be able to win in that time though, unless he's got a combo in hand. Mary Reed and Anne Bonny activates, going for the loot, and it'll be an artifact into play. Okay, I just saw he discarded his commander there, so he's deciding to put his commander into the bin. That's what I was concerned about him playing next turn, to be honest. Skeleton Crew gets a Skeleton Pirate into play. Alright, so discards his Admiral Brass just to replay it from the command zone again, so thought we dodged a bullet there, apparently not. Let's see what he can do with a full graveyard. 53 cards he's got to choose from here, although he will mill 4, so 57 in the graveyard now. He aims himself there at Edward Kenway, so at the end step make a treasure for each pirate you control, and it cares about vehicles as well. So it looks as though we saw the best 2 pirates right at the beginning of the game there. He does have an Anger I just spotted in the bin as well, so he's got haste on all his stuff, including the creatures that came down this turn. Makes another skeleton token when that enters as well, so... Oh, he's got flying, so there must be a wonder in the bin also. We weren't going to block here anyway. Goes for the loot on the commander again, maybe he's attempting to one-shot us. Swinging in with everything seemingly, leaving back the Edward Kenway. So I'll just take the damage here, we're north of our starting life total still. And some of the attack went over to the left, so he's stealing the monarchy there. That means one less card that he's going to have to mill. Still looking at this Sunforger over here, although he won't have as many cards to tutor for now. And when all the treasure are made, yep, he's going to pile the plus counters onto this to make it a really good blocker. We're just after as much life gain as we can lay our hands on at this point though. Has 5 cards in hand with a bunch of treasure held up, so could always have some interaction for our stuff. It's been the threat the entire game really. A Soul Warden to help us gain some life this turn. I think is going to be worth playing. So just dropping a plane should be fine. Play Soul Warden first. See what we draw into from the Inspiring Overseer. This will enter and gain us a couple of life. And then the Soul Warden will gain us a couple as well, of course. Okay, I don't know if this is Magic Online or if it's the virtual machine. It's not responding here. Hopefully it wakes up soon. Alright, just restarted the client and managed to get back in with 30 seconds left on the clock. I appreciate my opponents continuing to play this out. Alright, we get into another Ajani's Pridemate. So we can gain some more life here. We've gained 4 so far. It'll be 6, and then disturbing this will be 8. I think that's all we're really doing here. So Ajani's Pridemate, and obviously the more life we gain, the more this is going to get buffed, and the more it will gain it with lifelink, assuming that it's able to do that. It will now tangle with the 11/11, and then disturbing out the Luminous Phantom. This only gains life, like I said before, on things leaving the battlefield, but it'll trigger Soul Warden at least. So this turn, what was it? 2, 4, 6, 8, plus 14, or actually 28 with this alone. Yeah, that should be enough, as long as we can keep our commander in play. Point the Angel at the Ajani's Pridemate for lifelink, and we have to land damage with this, otherwise we're not going to be winning here, so might as well just swing in with that. We have to not lose hope. There's a few things that have to go right for us here. And we draw a card off the Brina, and it's just a land. He's at 56 life, so likely just takes the damage here, assuming that he can't remove it. He can't remove it apparently, so more plus counters. We go up to 61, steal the Monarch as well. So are we allowed through to the end step with hope is the question. If they've got something to do to our commander, they need to do it now. But looks as though we're going to be able to do it. Successfully milling at both of our opponents. I don't even know how much life we gained there, but it was 30 on this alone thanks to the Rock's Faith Mender. And we can even refill our hand next turn, although we don't have much mana to do that with. But all we have to do now is pass through to our opponents and they can draw from an empty library. Ha, that's funny. There's a Mistveil Plains, so our opponent manages to... Oh, that'd be awesome. So he's going to draw into the mob rule here. Is he going to be able to survive and take us out? I don't think he'll be able to take us out, but that would be incredible if he can survive this. Yeah, I did see the Mistveil Plains before and totally forgot about it. And come to think of it, there's an Academy Ruins here that can have this guy survive the mill as well. Soars to Plowshares onto his own Queen Marchesa. Decides on casting it anyway. That is power 4 or greater he gets to steal. The question is, does he have a pirate in his graveyard that can do something with Admiral Brass? That would be interesting. And even though our opponent is controlling this commander, the commander damage does still matter. It doesn't matter who hits us with this commander, it's tied to the individual cards, so still don't think that'll be relevant. It's going to be more life total that matters in this instance. A spell swindle, so mob rule is being countered by the pirate in order to make more treasure. I mean, he can just do it again next turn, assuming that we can't blow up the plains. And a Tybalt's Trickery. Wow, what a game this is. Going after the pirate player apparently, which I'm glad about because I don't fancy playing against two Academy Ruins / Mistveil Plains. I thought the game was over previously because they threw up the good games, and then obviously thought afterwards about the land. He's now saying that, yeah, I didn't think about the monarch draw either. If he attacks me and takes the monarchy, then he's dead to that draw. So, I mean, what do we do here? I don't know if it's likely that either player can get rid of us, but it's just kind of at a stalemate at this point. At least we will have cards to draw into, so that we can potentially do something about the predicament we're in. I did have Rest in Peace in the deck, but I traded it out for a card that I'll put up on the screen. It's called Honor the Fallen, a 2-mana instant. Exile all creatures in all graveyards, gain a life for each one removed this way. Obviously went with that over Rest in Peace for the life gain shenanigans, but well, maybe it's worth having both. Although I do have Farewell in the deck, I think. I think that's why I decided against Rest in Peace. Maybe it's worth squeezing in Rest in Peace regardless if we're going to go up against players that can play from the graveyard. Anyway, takes the pirate player out, so he's got 4 cards available to him and can consistently grab something with this, so can we do something to get rid of him? Suppose we can still try to deplete his life total. Oh, he's got Blasphemous Act, of course he does. So we are going to gain a bunch of life here from this, but Hope only triggers at the end of our turn, so this is why I went for the lifelink theme. Our Ajani's Pridemate survives at least. Don't suppose he has another board wipe available to him. So let's see what we draw. We're going to have to play around the Ghostly Prison as well. There's another Soul Sister for us, which I don't think is as relevant anymore. Just need to pray that we hold on to this for a couple of turns really. So we'll play a land for the turn, go straight through to combat, pay the 2 life into it. Yeah, we will pass the turn. X is going to be only 4. We'll draw to the Monarch as well. And there's Smothering Tithe, absolutely useless when our opponent can't draw more than 1 card a turn. He has to spend a couple of lands in order to carry on doing what he's doing. No counter spells in this deck. Decided to build a fair deck that actually uses combat. Although obviously we've got combos in here as well. We haven't seen any of the mill stuff that we've got in the list. It's mainly life gain. Alright, and our opponent just decides to scoop. I'm sure he could have dragged that out for a long time. I mean, surely he's got swords. Yeah, he used swords previously, didn't he? So he could have swords our Ajani Pridemate. But then how is he winning from that point? It's just dragging the game out even further, because eventually we can draw into a bunch more cards, flood the board with a bunch more creatures, and whilst he can consistently wipe them out with Blasphemous Act over and over again, he's not actually progressing to a win. So doing the right thing in conceding there, I think. Yeah, turns out that gamble early on in the game, allowing the pirate player to swing in at us, ended up paying off. It's still arguable whether I should have done that or not. I mean, if we didn't deal with the big threats that were in the graveyard right there and then, we would have had to have dealt with them down the line anyway. And we did force our opponents to deal with them, as opposed to dealing with our stuff, so it panned out alright in the end. I'm just glad that we managed to go up against that powerful pirate reanimator list, help him out with his graveyard, and still come out on top. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed that one. That was a really good showing, I think. I'll be diving into the new set next week, I think, assuming that we've still got early access, which they do sometimes pull at the last second. Anyway, hopefully you all look forward to the new videos regardless. Massive thank you to the patrons for continuing to support me on this channel. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.